pass soon.
This is bull. I'm not selling this land until everything is perfectly fair and we do this the right way. Sorry.
It's a standoff at the Coyote Pass.
The tempest, which is going to shake the world of Sister Wives to its very foundations, isn't something TLC will ever broadcast on Sunday evening television. No, this is the type of scandal which networks bury, the type of truth which entire PR departments and high-priced lawyers run around trying to cover. We're talking about a revelation so explosive, so meticulously hidden.
Healing with Mary. I would love healing with Janelle. I would love healing with Christine.
That it doesn't just challenge the Brown family's image, it threatens to rewrite the entire history of their financial empire and the reality behind Kody and Robyn's so-called partnership. What's been revealed is something greater than yet another bout of jealousy, another acrimonious fight, or yet another spiritual divorce. This has nothing to do with shattered vows or emotional deception, although there's plenty of that. No, this is about finances, cold hard cash, and a brazen scam which, in insider leaks, a judge has now seen fit to brand as fraud. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the recordings, the secret tapes that allegedly cornered Kody and Robyn in court and exposed what sources are calling nothing less than a $1.6 million cover-up. And let me tell you, this story...
Her name is Robyn, and she would never let me do anything naughty. As bad as I want to do it.
This is only the beginning. But before I walk you through every shocking detail, every transcript, and every carefully traced bank transfer, I need you to do one thing for me. If you're sick of TLC's slick production, if you're sick of the half-truths and white lies, and if you need to see the unvarnished truth that nobody else has the guts to feature on TV, then be sure to hit that like button and subscribe with notifications activated. Because this, what I'm about to show you, is only the opening salvo in a much larger collapse. For decades, the defining promise of the Brown family, the scaffolding they sold to the world, rested on one bedrock concept: one family. That term was more than a slogan. It was an economic covenant. The family pot, as Kody had affectionately referred to it, wasn't merely a checking account, it was their sense of togetherness. Every dime, whether it came from Christine's online hustle, Janelle's real estate ventures, Mary's bed and breakfast, or of course the millions from their TLC contract, was supposed to flow into this sacred pool. From that pot, mortgages were paid, groceries bought, medical bills covered, and futures supposedly secured. It was meant to be the practical expression of their spiritual agreement. Regardless of who made what, all were provided for equally. That was the vision. That was the vow. But those insiders familiar with the recent court hearings are telling a very different story. They're telling us that whole idea, that family pot, was smoke and mirrors. A skillfully built deception. That started to fall apart the day Christine finally pulled out. And now, by what's been hinted in quietly kept secrecy court, that deception has fallen flat completely under its own crushing weight of incriminating evidence. And the story doesn't start with a judge's gavel. It begins in the quiet, suffocating tension of those Flagstaff homes, as Christine's bags were packed, as Janelle's independence grew, and as Mary's emotional distance became permanent. Kody Brown allegedly started to spiral. But this wasn't just panic over lost loyalty. This wasn't just a man watching his family slip away. No, this was financial panic. He and his wife of choice, Robyn, saw the writing on the wall. The wives were packing up, the cohesion was broken, and the so-called family pot was going to get ripped open and split. It was then documents and transcripts showed the court that the conspiracy gained momentum. And let's be clear, this was not a case of divorce. Legally, Kody would never be able to divorce women he was never legally wed to in the first place. Janelle and Mary, with Christine secretly supporting them, instead brought a civil complaint against Kody and Robyn Brown. The allegations? Breach of fiduciary duty, unjust enrichment, civil fraud. They claimed, and rightly so, that this was not merely a spiritual arrangement. For decades, they had operated more like a financial partnership. Kody, de facto CEO of the family finances, had a responsibility to distribute that money pot equitably and openly. Their complaint suggested that rather than living up to that, trust, Kody and Robyn systematically redirected funds into their own pockets. The figure at stake for this scheme, $1.6 million. Now the million-dollar question is, how in the world could they possibly establish it? That's where this tale takes its most surprising turn. Because from leaks, the smoking gun wasn't in suspicious bank statements form. No, it was in audio recordings form, secret tapes. We don't know exactly who pressed record. Was it a fed-up employee sick of cleaning up after the Browns' mess? An adult child who'd finally had enough? Or could it be the result of a mandatory financial consultation that Kody himself underestimated? The beginning is still unclear, but what is significant is this. These tapes ended up in court, and sources say the transcripts were read into a hushed, shocked courtroom. The first recording, allegedly from late 2020, captures a private conversation between Kody and Robyn in their $1 million Flagstaff home. Picture the scene, the walls closing in, the family crumbling, and behind closed doors, Kody and Robyn whispering about what comes next. The transcript reads with chilling clarity. Kody's voice is low and conspiratorial. They don't get it, Robyn. They don't see the big picture. The family is shrinking, becoming what it was always meant to be. Only the loyal ones, only the ones who respect the patriarchy. That's the real family now, Robyn responds, worried, fearful. But if they all leave, what happens to us? What happens to everything we've built? They'll want their piece of the pie. And then Kody hands over the jaw-dropping portion in court. What piece? The pie is the family's, and we're the heart of the family. The rest? They're independent contractors now. Christine broke my trust. Janelle's off in her RV. They can't just walk and demand a golden parachute on my sweat and the show's success. The show is about us now. You, me, and our kids. The transcript goes on. And this is where the shocking becomes incriminating. Kody explains his plan in full. We need to restructure. It's not concealing money, it's safeguarding it. Asset protection for the legitimate family unit. We need to remove the liquid assets from the family account and into something secure. Something beneath a corporate veil. Something in your name, in mine. Dabzark. It's for Dayton, Aurora, Brianna, Solomon, and Ariella. This is their legacy. We can't let the bitterness of others ruin our children's future. Robyn hesitates. Is that even legal, Kody? Won't they notice? Kody assures her with cold assurance. It's just paperwork. By the time they notice, it'll already be done. We're not stealing. We're shielding what's sacred. The courtroom was completely silent, insiders say, as this transcript was read. Janelle and Mary sat motionless, not in shock, but in agonizing confirmation. By the words of Kody himself, here was the supposed plan to not just exclude them emotionally, but financially, to redefine the family as Robyn and her kids, and stealthily move millions into a new framework. And that name, Dabzark, was the focus of the case. Why? Because soon after this exchange, a brand new LLC showed up on Arizona business filings. Dabzark Entertainment LLC, filed early 2021, registered agents, none other than Kody and Robyn Brown. But an LLC and a tape in hand aren't sufficient. You need to trace the money. And that's precisely what forensic accountants hired by Janelle's legal team did. In what those close to him call a masterclass shutdown, they equated Kody's words to cold, hard facts. As the judge heard the transcript where Kody detailed restructuring, the overhead screen flashed with a bank statement revealing a $400,000 withdrawal from the family trust account, dated only 2 weeks after the purported conversation. Next slide, a loan from the same amount deposited into the brand new account for Dabzark Entertainment LLC. The memo line, bordering on haughty in its basicity, family restructuring loan. And that was just the initial example. The lawyers then showed how the profits from the sale of the 4 Las Vegas houses, money earmarked for financing the building in Coyote Pass, didn't all go where the family had been led to believe. Yes, some went towards the land, but hundreds of thousands more were tracked into convoluted transfers that ultimately fed directly into Kody and Robyn's new venture. There was another audio recording, this one of Kody discussing something with a financial advisor. The advisor attempted to explain, so you want to liquidate these positions and put the full amount into the new corporate account? Typically, with a dissolution of a family partnership, we'd establish trusts or agreements separately. Kody cut in, this is not a dissolution. This is a consolidation. The family is not dissolving. It's purifying. And right there, in his own words, Kody explained what the others had suspected all along. For him, family was no longer about equality or unity. It was about stripping everyone else away and pouring everything, emotional allegiance and financial clout, into Robyn and her kids. Kody Brown once boasted, I am the president of the family corporation. I make the executive calls. And in his mind, that gave him the right to take the pot of money everyone had contributed to for decades and reinvest it in what he referred to as the most stable and loyal part of the portfolio. Of course, we all know who that actually meant, Robyn and her kids. He came in with the same presentation as if it were a business decision, like Janelle and Mary had already approved it. But the transcripts reveal a bleaker picture. Following a deep silence, the voice of Kody is heard to say, their signature is implied by their continued participation in the family. They trust my leadership. It's all above board. Just process the transfer. And with that, the facade of fairness crumbled. In court, the prosecution exposed the truth. $350,000 stolen from liquidated stocks and bonds. Another $150,000 sucked out of an account called Show Bonus Royalties. Piece by piece, over 18 months, money slowly bled out. By the end, over $1.6 million had supposedly been withdrawn from family-controlled accounts and funneled directly into Dabsark LLC, the shell company owned only by Kody and Robyn. And where did it go? Not shared mortgages, not higher education for the numerous offspring of the extended family. No, the books indicated it went into extravagance. Romps to Hawaii for Kody and Robyn, designer clothes, high-end cars, even large investments in Robyn's notorious jewelry store venture, My Sister Wife's Closet, a scheme that had been a thorn in their side, hemorrhaging money while other wives covered, but perhaps the most shocking revelation of all involved, Coyote Pass, the land that had been the Browns' promised future, their dream, the reason they uprooted their lives for Flagstaff in the first place. Everyone had contributed to its purchase. Everyone had sacrificed. Yet, prosecutors revealed that Dabsark LLC had placed a lien on Janelle and Mary's parcels of that very land. Why? For so-called unpaid management fees. That is, allegedly, Kody and Robyn formed a company with the family's funds, then charged the other wives for the privilege of being landowners that they themselves had already purchased. It was so outrageous, predatory in action that the judge herself was forced to stop the trial. Staring Kody's attorney in the face, she posed with hardly suppressed incredulity. Is your client actually claiming that he used community money to form a company that in turn charged his business partners for handling the very assets those community funds had bought? Fumbling weak was the defense's response. A spectacle, and that was the overall thesis of Kody's whole case. His attorneys relied on one weak argument, that Kody had always been the sole legal husband, the patriarch, the only legally binding one. They attempted to portray Janelle and Mary as embittered, unfaithful women reaching for money after deserting. They attempted to make the family pot out never to have been a legal partnership in the first place. But finally, there came the time that everyone was waiting for. Kody Brown himself testified. And by all accounts, his testimony was a fiasco from the first word, arrogant, condescending, evasive. That was the impression he left behind. When the incriminating transcripts were read, he refused to deny that it was his voice. He didn't even attempt to. Instead, he insisted that his own words were being taken out of context. He argued restructuring the funds wasn't theft, it was protection, a divine duty to preserve what he now referred to as the true family. In his own words, Dabsark wasn't fraud, it was a lifeboat for the faithful. But the defense was ruthless. They aired a clip of Sister Wives, in which Kody tearfully stated that he loved all his wives and would do anything for them. They followed that with the audio tape in which he dismissed those same wives as independent contractors who didn't warrant a golden parachute. The hypocrisy was out there like a hangman's noose. When prompted to respond, Kody went off on a meandering monologue regarding loyalty, patriarchal responsibility, and scripture, but never at any point actually answered the simple question. He criticized Janelle for seeking to live in her RV, blaming her for being irresponsible. He portrayed Mary as a deserter for working on her Utah bed and breakfast. He positioned himself as the victim, a misinterpreted patriarch, betrayed by wayward wives, cornered into making tough decisions to defend his real family with Robyn. But Judge Annabelle Peterson wasn't having any. Characterized by insiders as tough and uncompromising, her tolerance wore thinner with each evasive response. Each tried to turn the narrative on its head into a tale of treachery and loyalty, rather than what it was, deceit. Because the prosecution had made their case on fact, piles and piles of them, bank records, LLC reports, credit card statements, property deeds, and facts always carry more weight than ideology. Then came one of the most powerful moments of the entire trial. Janelle Brown stepped up to testify. Unlike Kody, she was calm, composed, and quietly devastating. She didn't rant, she didn't attack, she simply told the truth. She spoke of nearly 3 decades of work, full-time jobs while raising 6. Children, paychecks pooled into the family pot, sacrifices made so everyone could have more. She said she had left things in Kody's trust to handle their shared assets responsibly. And then her attorney posed the question that pierced her very heart. Mrs. Brown, when you listened on tape to Mr. Brown say that you were an independent contractor who didn't deserve a golden parachute, how did that sit with you after 30 years of contributing to the family? Janelle stopped, caught her breath, and addressed the judge squarely. She did not glance at Kody. She declared, "It was a gut kick. It wasn't something about a golden parachute. It was something about my work. It was something about providing for my children. I wasn't asking for a handout. I was asking for what belonged to me, what I had earned." To have it dismissed so cavalierly proved that the man I had created a life with never regarded me as a partner, but a disposable commodity. That moment quieted the courtroom. Her words put the entire case in a different light. Kody had attempted to make it a morality play about fidelity, but Janelle asserted this was about theft, calculated, deliberate financial dishonesty. Mary testified next, brief but no less acute. She described the family's initial dream, the unity they once vowed to each other, and how that had been eroded one piece at a time until this ultimate betrayal. She produced receipts, literal receipts, for the seed money she'd taken out, of family finances to begin her bed and breakfast, and how she'd carefully repaid every penny, only to find out, in the harshest irony, that the very pot she had contributed to was being tapped behind her back. Next was Robyn's turn. And sure enough, as everyone predicted, she cried. She played the part of the innocent witness, saying she knew nothing about the money dealings. She stated she just trusted her husband. She said she signed on for the LLC because Kody explained it was for the protection of the children, but cross-examination tore that picture to pieces. Prosecutors showed her credit card bills, a $15,000 purchase at a high-end brand. She said it was a business expense. They introduced the down payment for a new luxury SUV. She said it was a company car. And then there was the tape, the very recording in which Robyn herself asked Kody, "Is that legal, Kody? Moving it all." She attempted to portray herself as the clueless wife who didn't know complicated business things. But prosecutors weren't having it. They presented emails in which Robyn was talking to Kody about which properties to transfer first. They showed text messages in which she marked out certain accounts that were paid for by Janelle and Mary as priority targets. The mask slipped. The crying victim's story cracked. What was revealed was a scenario not just of complicity, but active collaboration in the scam. The tears, the prosecutors said, weren't for a shattered family. They were for fear of being exposed. By the end of this stage of the trial, the scene was clear. The tapes, the transcripts, the bank records, the filings with the LLC, all of them converged on one point. A man and his favorite wife, confronted with losing their multiple family, allegedly opted to steal the money and flee, to conceal it in their children's names in a corporate disguise and label it protection. The betrayal was not just emotional, it was financial, deliberate, and devastating. The courtroom recessed for the last day, and the anticipation was suffocating. Everyone knew what lay ahead. Judge Peterson had witnessed the evidence, heard the contradictions, and considered the testimonies. The verdict would not only determine millions of dollars, it would be a final, official verdict on the integrity of Kody and Robyn Brown. The family pot was bare, and the court was soon to decide on exactly who had sucked it dry. The following morning, with the day of trial's final day, the Coconino County Courthouse was laden with history. Kody and Robyn entered as one, hand in hand, their faces somber, but resolute. Janelle and Mary entered separately, their faces resolute with quiet determination. Christine sat in the spectators' gallery, not a plaintiff, but a symbol. She had outwitted the trap, but she came to see it all come tumbling down. As Judge Annabelle Peterson walked in, the room fell silent. She took her seat, put her glasses on, and settled her eyes on Kody Brown. It was a sustained, piercing look. That seemed to undress him naked, leaving only the patriarch as man waiting to be judged. And then she spoke, her words crisp and intentional. This court has heard lengthy testimony and considered an avalanche of evidence in the case of Brown and Brown versus Brown. The case at bar is not one of mere domestic squabble, nor a financial dispute between lovers. What has been set forth here is an intentional and systematic account of deceit, a deep violation of trust, and what this court can only determine as a calculating and flagrant act of fraud. The word hung in the air. Fraud. It wasn't an accusation anymore. It was now an established fact by the law. The courtroom remained silent as Judge Annabelle Peterson went on with her scathing judgment. She wasn't being polite, and she wasn't going to let Kody's defense spin reality into yet another self-serving myth. She leaned forward, her voice firm but crisp, and made it unmistakable that Kody's whole legal case, this notion that the family pot was some informal, casual arrangement under his sole discretion as patriarch, was not only flimsy but insulting. To her, it was an insult to the very idea of partnership. For years, Janelle, Mary, and yes, even Christine had invested their time, money, and trust in what each of them thought was a shared venture. They gave up careers, put in their sweat equity, and bet on Kody to deal fairly. And yet, here he was, attempting to portray their work as simply acts of favor to him, as if decades of dedication did not entitle them to legal rights and moral entitlements. The judge pierced that fantasy with surgical precision. Then came the hammer blow. She addressed the notorious Dabsurk Entertainment LLC, the so-called firm Kody and Robyn had established in secrecy. With every word, the judge unwound the truth, This wasn't restructuring. This wasn't protection. This was a heist. A brazen move to drain communal funds into a slush fund controlled by just two individuals, Kody and Robyn Brown. And she put the courtroom in mind of precisely whom those funds had belonged to in the first place. They weren't ghosts in a spreadsheet. They were houses sold, enterprises sacrificed, TV revenue divided, and security for the future of 13 children. To Judge repeated Kody's own words, the audio testimony that had already been heard in court. The tape where Kody callously referred to his 3-decade wives as independent contractors who were not owed a golden parachute. Just think about it. Decades of creating his empire on their sacrifices, and he metaphorically reduced them to throwaway workers, not partners. To the judge, it was irrefutable evidence of intent. This was not careless accounting. It was outright theft. And then her eyes turned to Robyn. The scene was harsh. Robyn, as expected, erupted into tears, dabbing tissues against her face, shaking. Her head in a gesture of refusal toward the inevitable. She huddled into the well-rehearsed role she's adopted for years, the distraught, overwrought wife who just didn't know what was happening. But Judge Peterson wasn't falling for it. She testified that Robyn's testimony was utterly incredible. The emails, the texts, the recordings themselves, where Robyn herself wondered aloud if what they were doing was even legal. They told a story that could not be dismissed. Robyn wasn't blind. She was doing her part to draw the map. She wasn't a witness. She was a co-conspirator, and the judge, in a phrase that will probably be remembered for years to come, cut straight through Robyn's charade. The tears of an aggrieved wife do not erase the ink of a co-conspirator's signature. Kody, slumped red-faced, his bluster snuffed out by the justice in the judge's words. Robyn cried, but Janelle and Mary remained stone still, their eyes fixed on the bench, expecting justice they had been denied for decades. The judge continued. She spoke over them in righteous outrage as she reminded everyone precisely what this money was. Not extra income, not side profits, but the actual life savings of 4 women. It was equity from the Las Vegas houses. It was combined revenue from their show. It was startup capital for businesses that never saw the same attention Robyn's projects did. It was meant to be the cushion for all of the Brown kids. Rather, it had been skimmed off to purchase luxury holidays, top-of-the-line cars, and to fund a tanking jewelry business that had split the family apart for years. Then, the figure that made the courtroom gasp. After studying forensic accounting reports, the judge verified that a total of $1,724,438 had been systematically siphoned from family accounts into Kody and Robyn's shell company. In measured tones, she said that this was not just a breach of fiduciary duty and unjust enrichment, but civil fraud of the highest order. And just when it appeared the gavel would drop, the judge moved from verdict to penalty. What ensued was nothing less than gut-wrenching. Kody and Robyn were required to pay back each and every cent, more than $1.6 million to Janelle and Mary. But it got worse. Due to the vindictive nature of their actions, she tacked on $500,000 in punitive damages. Then she added an attorney. Fees and court costs of another $285,000. After everything was said and done, the final judgment was an eye-popping $209,510.38. The courtroom shook with shock. Kody visibly winced, as if the figure itself had delivered a physical punch. Robyn gasped between sobs, her hands trembling as she grabbed at tissues. Their empire had just fallen apart in real time, but the judge wasn't done dismantling their fortress. She ordered Dabsark Entertainment LLC dissolved immediately, with all its assets seized and liquidated by a court-appointed receiver. She declared the liens Kody and Robyn had placed on Janelle and Mary's Coyote Pass parcels fraudulent, void from inception. With one stroke, she returned the land to its rightful owners, freeing it from Kody's manipulative grip. Then came the crushing blow. The judge put a lien on Kody and Robyn's Flagstaff mansion, preventing them from selling it or refinancing it until the judgment was paid. She also issued wage garnishment, 25% of all future income, including any they receive. From sister wives or spin-offs, will go directly to Janelle and Mary. Their main source of income, their program, was now legally bound to the same women they had attempted to exclude. Their million-dollar residence had become an economic jail. Lastly, the judge spoke her final words straight to Kody, her voice slicing the quiet like a knife. She informed him that he had mixed up patriarchy and tyranny, leadership and theft. She stated plainly, "You did not protect your family, you pillaged it." The gavel came down. Case closed. The silence in the room was oppressive, with only Robyn's weeping to break it. Kody remained immobile, shock and anger carved onto his features. But across the aisle, Janelle and Mary exchanged a look, tears pouring down their faces. It wasn't just winning, it was liberation. 30 years of sacrifice, manipulation, and betrayal finally acknowledged. Christine, who had traveled to be in the courtroom when the verdict came down, didn't weep. She just stood, regarded Kody with a soft mixture of acknowledgement and pity, and smiled. Not a smug smile, but a smile of quiet confirmation. She'd made her own escape before the ship went down, and now she watched it go down for good. And then, without comment, she turned to leave, head held high. The pandemonium outside the courthouse was instantaneous. Cameras and reporters surged, screaming questions. Kody pushed through, yanking Robyn into a parked car, his silence more damning than any apology he might have made. But Janelle and Mary stood in front of the microphones. Janelle's statements were measured and deliberate. Today was not about revenge. It was about truth. It was about accountability. The consequences were earth-shattering. A $2.4 million verdict, wage garnishments, dissolution of their LLC, a home they could no longer use without restriction. Kody and Robyn were financially devastated, their reputation not merely blackened, but legally stigmatized with fraud. And now, the ultimate questions were left in the air. What does Sister Wives become? Can the show sustain its lead stars being publicly humiliated? Would TLC just cut its losses? Or would they go all in on the catastrophe, making Kody and Robyn's failure the highest stakes reality TV story so far? And then there was Robyn. Fans for years have been left wondering, was she in this marriage for love or lifestyle? Now that the lifestyle was lost, would she stick by Kody through public shame and financial devastation? Or would this judgment signal the end for them as a couple? But the most creepy question hung over them like a specter. Who leaked the recordings that brought Kody down? Some say it may have been one of his own children. Perhaps a son who had watched his mother discarded, who had seen the favoritism play out in real time, and who finally decided enough was enough. If true, it wasn't just wives standing against a husband, it was a family rising up against its own patriarch to demand accountability. And that's what this case uncovered in the end. The family pot was never a family thing. It was a control thing. The patriarchy was never a leadership thing. It was a domination thing. And the dream Kody marketed to the world as a plural family bound together by love, it was nothing more than smoke and mirrors, evaporated now into the cold light of a courtroom and a $2.4 million judgment. The Brown Empire is no more. Out of its ashes, 4 women with freedom to make their own futures, and the man who made his demands on loyalty first is left to suffocate among the rubble of his own avarice. The courtroom was silent as Judge Annabelle Peterson continued her scathing judgment. She wasn't holding back, and she wasn't going to let Kody's defense spin reality into another self-serving fabrication. She leaned forward, her tone firm but keen, and let it be known that Kody's whole legal case, this notion that the family pot was some loose, informal arrangement in his sole discretion as patriarch, was not just bad, but insulting. It was an insult to the very idea of partnership in her eyes. For years, Janelle, Mary, and even Christine had invested their faith, money, and time into what they all assumed was a shared venture. They had given up careers, put their sweat into it, and had believed Kody would operate fairly. And yet here he was, attempting to describe their efforts as mere favors done unto him, as though their years of service afforded them no legal basis, and no claim of morality. The judge sliced through that fantasy with a surgeon's finesse. And then there came the hammer blow. She looked at the notorious Dabsark Entertainment LLC, the supposed company Kody and Robyn had constructed in secret. With every sentence, the judge unwrapped the truth. This was not restructuring. This was not protection. This was a heist. A deliberate move to drain common assets into a slush fund controlled by just 2 people, Kody and Robyn Brown. And she brought the courtroom back to who those assets originally belonged to. They were not faceless numbers in an account book. They were homes marketed, businesses compromised, television revenue shared, and protection for 13 children's futures. The judge recited Kody's own words, the audio testimony that had already been presented in court. The tape where Kody callously referred to his 3-decade wives as independent contractors who were not owed a golden parachute. Picture that. Having spent decades constructing his kingdom on their sacrifices, he demeaned them to disposal workers, not equals. To the judge, it was irrefutable evidence of intent. This was not careless accounting, it was conscious stealing. Then her eyes traveled over to Robyn. The scene was savage. Robyn predictably cried, clutching tissues to her face, shaking her. Head in a gesture of denial of the inevitable, she leaned into the well-rehearsed role she's been playing for years, the delicate, befuddled wife who just didn't know what was happening. But Judge Peterson wasn't having it. She declared Robyn's testimony utterly incredible. The emails, the texts, the very recordings where Robyn herself questioned whether what they were doing was even legal, they painted a picture that couldn't be ignored. Robyn wasn't in the dark. She was helping draw the map. She wasn't a bystander. She was a co-conspirator, and the judge, in a sentence that is bound to be used as a quotation for years to come, cut through Robyn's performance. The tears of an aggrieved wife do not wash away the ink of a co-conspirator's signature. Kody, slumped, red-faced, his bluster collapsing under the force of the judge's remarks. Robyn cried uncontrollably, but Janelle and Mary sat unmoving, their eyes fixed on the bench, waiting for justice they were denied for decades. The judge wasn't done. She stood up in righteous outrage as she reminded everyone just what this money was: not side profits, not extra income, but the actual life savings of 4 women. It was the equity of the Las Vegas houses. It was pooled revenue from their show. It was startup money for businesses that never received the same publicity Robyn's enterprises had. It was meant to be the Brown family's safety net. Instead, it had been diverted to purchase luxury getaways, designer cars, and to support a struggling jewelry company that had polarized the family for years. Next came the figure that made the courtroom gasp. Upon examining forensic accounting reports, the judge upheld that a total of $1,624,510.38 had been systematically withdrawn from family accounts into Kody and Robyn's shell company. With calculated composure, she declared that it was not only a violation of fiduciary duty and unjust enrichment, but civil fraud of the highest order. And just as it appeared the gavel was going to come crashing down, the judge moved from verdict to sentencing. What came next was utterly devastating. Kody and Robyn were instructed to pay back every penny, more than $1.6 million to Janelle and Mary. But that wasn't all. Due to the malicious intent behind their actions, she attached $500,000 in punitive damages. She added attorney fees and court expenses of another $285,000 to it. After it was all said and done, the final judgment stood at a whopping $409,510.38. The courtroom shook with astonishment. Kody visibly winced, as if the figure itself had dealt a corporeal blow. Robyn sobbed her breath in shock, shaking hands grabbing at tissues. Their empire had just collapsed before their eyes. But the judge wasn't done dismantling their fortress. She ordered Dabsark Entertainment LLC dissolved immediately, with all its assets seized and liquidated by a court-appointed receiver. She declared the liens Kody and Robyn had placed on Janelle and Mary's Coyote Pass parcels fraudulent, void from inception. With one stroke, she returned the land to its rightful owners, freeing it from Kody's manipulative grip. Then came the crushing blow. The judge put a lien on Kody and Robyn's Flagstaff mansion, preventing them from selling or refinancing until the judgment is paid. She also issued an order for wage garnishment. 25% of everything they earn in the future, including anything they make from sister wives or spin-off media, would go straight to Janelle and Mary. Their main source of income, their program, was now legally bound to the very women they had attempted to exclude. Their million-dollar residence had become a money prison. At last, the judge gave her final words to Kody, her voice slicing through the quiet like a knife. She informed him that he had got patriarchy mixed up with tyranny and leadership with theft. She said squarely, "You did not defend your family, you pillaged it." The gavel came down. Case closed. The room was thick with silence, punctuated only by the sobbing of Robyn. Kody sat immobile, a look of fury and disbelief on his face. But across the aisle from him, Janelle and Mary gazed at one another, the tears streaming down their faces. It was not merely victory, it was release. 3 decades of sacrifice, manipulation, and betrayal finally affirmed. Christine, who had traveled in to hear the verdict, did not weep. She just stood, gazed at Kody with a look of recognition and pity, and smiled. Not a victorious smile, but one of muted approval. She had fled before the ship had gone down, and now she stood by to see it sink for the last time. Then, without a sound, she turned and walked out, her head high. The pandemonium outside the courthouse was instant. Cameras and reporters flooded in, shouting questions. Kody pushed his way through, yanking Robyn into a waiting vehicle, his silence more eloquent than any apology he might have made. But Janelle and Mary stood before the microphones. Janelle's voice was measured and even. Today was not about revenge. It was about truth. It was about accountability. The backlash was immense. A $2.4 million verdict. Garnishment of their wages, dissolution of their LLC, a house they could no longer use as they pleased. Kody and Robyn were financially devastated. Their image not only smeared, but legally stigmatized with fraud. And then the serious questions hung in the air. What becomes of Sister Wives? Would the show be able to survive its lead stars publicly humiliated? Would TLC cut its losses? Or would they go all in on the catastrophe, making Kody and Robyn's implosion reality TV's wildest storyline ever? And then there was Robyn. Fans had been speculating for years. Was she in this marriage for love or lifestyle? Now that the lifestyle had been taken away, would she stay with Kody through public shame and financial devastation? Or would this judgment mark the end of the world for them as a couple? But the most terrifying question hung over their heads like a specter. Who was it that released the tapes that toppled Kody? Some believe it could have been one of his own children, maybe a son who had seen his mother discarded, who had witnessed the favoritism unfolding before his very eyes, and who finally said enough was enough. If so, it wasn't wives against one husband, it was a family up in arms against its own patriarch, for accountability. And that's what this case uncovered ultimately. The family pot was never about family. It was about control. The patriarchy was never about leadership. It was about domination, and the dream Kody peddled to the world as a plural, family bonded through love, it was nothing more than smoke and mirrors, melted now into the bitter truth of a courtroom and a $2.4 million verdict. The Brown dynasty is no more. Out of the ashes rise 4 women free to forge their own futures, and the man who insisted on loyalty above all else left to suffocate amid the ashes of his own avarice.